Courtney Mares, welcome to Power and Witness. You've written a book, A Saint in Sneakers. That's about Carlo Acutis. I was wondering, we talked about him on the show. Brother John interviewed you, but was there some material like you wanted to cover maybe we didn't get to on the show that would be interesting? Or
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things we can talk about about Blessed Carlo. Yeah, I guess
any stories stand out in your mind that maybe you wanted to say? Or?
One of the things we didn't get to on the interview was talking about the miracles that led to his beatification and canonization. I know that, or upcoming canonization. Right. I know sometimes people are interested in that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
What are those?
So the miracle that led to Carlo's beatification took place in Brazil in 2013, and it involved a 3-year-old boy named Mateus, who was born with a malformation of his pancreas that caused him extreme digestive distress for his entire 3 years of life. So much so that he was actually malnourished because he was vomiting so much and wasn't getting the nutrients he needed. And doctors told his parents that he actually needed a transplant surgery, but that they were worried that he was so malnourished that he wasn't, strong enough to endure that surgery. And it just so happens that Mateus's parents brought him to a mass on the anniversary of Carlo's death on October 12th and in 2013. And now this is just after World Youth Day took place in Brazil. And that was a place where I think Carlo's story kind of was spread at that World Youth Day. And somehow this priest in Brazil had obtained a relic of Carlo Acutis, and he brought it out on the anniversary of the day Carlo died, and offered an opportunity for Mateus's family and everyone at the Mass to pray with the relic. And little 3-year-old Mateus reached out his hands, touched it, and just said, "Stop vomiting."
Really?
that was his prayer. And of course, all of his family was also there praying for his healing as well. And according to the Vatican decree, the healing was instant. And he went home and asked his mom, he wanted to eat French fries and steak and beans, and had this whole meal. And he was just fine after that. And eventually when his parents brought him back to the doctors, apparently the doctor made a comment that was kind of like, wow, his transplant surgery didn't leave any scars, because they thought that it was a completely new organ, his pancreas. So that was the miracle that was approved by the Vatican that led to Carlo's beatification.
Has there been a second miracle for the?
There has. So that was something we just learned about from the Vatican in June. And so just a month ago, Pope Francis approved it. And it involved the healing of a 22-year-old girl from Costa Rica who was studying abroad in Florence. And one day she was riding her bicycle, and she was involved in a terrible bicycle accident in which she severely injured her head. And so she was in the hospital, and doctors say, she was near death, fighting for her life. And her mother her parents came out, of course, to see her, be with her in the hospital. And while her family was there, her mother actually made a pilgrimage to the tomb of Carlo Acutis in Assisi, and went there and prayed. And it was on that very day that she began to breathe again without assistance, and then eventually made a full recovery. So it's two incredible. So what'd you say?
No brain damage or anything?
No.
Wow.
Yeah, and then she was able to do her own pilgrimage back to the tomb of Blessed Carlo not too long afterwards. So yeah, two incredible miraculous stories.
Is there a
that we
date
have.
for his canonization?
We're still waiting to hear from the Vatican. We were hoping to get it at the beginning of this month, but the Vatican just told us, the canonization has been approved, in a consistory of cardinals. We're just waiting on that date. I think, it's likely going to be during the Catholic Church's Jubilee year, which will be really exciting because it's a great opportunity for many people to be present, for this moment of his canonization. I think if I had to make a prediction, I'd put forward two potential dates. There's going to be, during a Jubilee year, there's so many mini Jubilees within the Jubilee. One of them is at the end of April. There's going to be the Jubilee of Teenagers. So if I had to guess, I think that would be a good date when we might see his canonization take place in the Jubilee of Teenagers. He died at 15. But there's also going to be a Jubilee of Youth next summer at the end of July. It's almost like a mini World Youth Day in a way within the Jubilee year. And it would also be great for him to be canonized during that, especially with kids being on break for the summer and more young people being able to travel. I don't know if the Vatican's taking that into consideration. But we also have Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, another great, patron of young people and a wonderful witness to the faith. And Pope Francis has been teasing us. He's kept saying, first it was the cardinal prefect of the dicastery for the causes of saints that kind of spilled the beans originally, saying, Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati is going to be canonized during the Jubilee year. And there was, of course, huge excitement for that. But then we don't have any official declaration yet from the Vatican, stating as such. But even Pope Francis has said, Blessed Giorgio is going to be canonized next year. He'll be a saint soon. And so there's a lot of anticipation for that as well. It'd be great if they could be canonized together, like this double header canonization. But I don't know. I guess we just have to wait and see how it's all going to play out. But it's certainly 2025 is going to be a big year.
And what is the overarching year of? Is it year of redemption or?
So it's an ordinary Jubilee. So we haven't had one of those since the Great Jubilee of 2000. So it's really exciting. But the theme of it is hope, pilgrims of hope. So that's something I think everyone needs more of right now. So something to unite the world around.
And what drew you to his story? I mean, it's a major effort to write a book. Ignatius Press book, right? They have high standards. What made you do it?
Yeah, as a Vatican journalist, one of my favorite things I cover is the stories of the saints, especially new and upcoming sainthood causes. And I'm always, eagerly reading about them and researching. And Blessed Carlo was someone who really stood out as someone who was born in, the early 1990s, loved computer coding and video games, died in 2006 of cancer. And I just had really never seen a saint like him. And it became clear as I was writing and publishing articles as his cause progressed that I was not the only one who was struck by this, that there were a lot of people who were really excited about Carlo. The articles that I would write about would be some of the most popular stories that we would publish on Catholic News Agency would be about Carlo Acutis. People just wanted to learn more. And it really came about during his beatification. I was there reporting on it for EWTN and CNA, and it just became clear that Carlo was such a great witness to holiness in our digital age in particular, and that people wanted to know more about him. And I saw at the time all of these books written in Italian about him, and at the time there was nothing that had been written, by a native English speaker in English for an American audience, and so it was not long after that I hit the ground running and took advantage of living in Italy and was able to go up to Milan and interview, his family, friends, and acquaintances. And the book is just filled with testimonies of people who knew Carlo, and it's amazing just in 15 years of life how many lives he was able to touch.
Right. And what do you think the significance of his love, connection, his work promoting the Eucharist? Is that a special message for our time, you think?
Certainly, yeah, definitely. That was something that Carlo really wanted to awaken people to the reality that God is with us. He's present in the Eucharist. And I think, that's kind of his key to his own holiness, kind of in living kind of a ordinary life of a young person, a student, a teenager, was going to the tabernacle and getting these graces from Mass, from confession, from prayer of the Rosary. And that's kind of, a path forward for us as well. But I mean, we see now with the U.S. bishops launching the National Eucharistic Revival, that there's so many Catholics out there who just don't know or are not aware or do not believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And that's something that is so vital to the Catholic faith. Right. And so Carlo was really kind of ahead of the curve, in having this strong desire to help people to know. And it's amazing to see, his research and his efforts to help spread the word about Eucharistic miracles at a time when, there wasn't as much online resources and things in the Catholic world.
Because he died in 2006.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine what the internet was like in 2006. I remember I was in seminary when it seemed like the internet was really getting going, like in '98 and stuff.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so he was on that curve.
Yeah.
I found it was interesting too about his family. Like his parents weren't devout, right? And you said it was a Polish nanny that taught him as a child some of the rudiments of the faith. Whatever happened to that nanny? Was she at the beatification or anything? Or?
Yeah, I that was one of the people I most wanted to connect with.
Right.
I mean, I was stalking social media. I was trying to connect with her, but her the family told me she just did not want to be. She didn't want to do any interviews with anyone. So it's a mystery.
Does she still live in Italy?
Yeah.
Oh, she does.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know where she's living.
Well, yeah, I find it interesting too, like the contact points with the culture. There's the video games and the sneakers and stuff. And,
right.
But also, isn't it, and I don't know Italy, but it just like Milan, Northern Italy is known, Milan especially, like for technology, for fashion, for design and stuff. And I had talked to one guy from Milan, and he said, yeah, we keep the rest of the country running. He said, Rome, they're not, they're late or whatever. So is he from that kind of intense, kind of almost like an American style culture a little bit? A little bit
of both. Yeah.
It
definitely, Northern Italy is different from Southern Italy. And Milan is this, fashion capital, financial capital. And he really did grow up, in the city.
Yeah.
But for Carlo, that was an advantage in that he was able to walk to his parish on his own on the way to school, which was really nice, because that was one of the mysteries for me going into this. I'm like, when I started writing this, I was like, how did an elementary school student whose parents weren't practicing attend daily Mass? You think about an American context, but he did, of course, end up dragging a lot of people along with him, family members or people with the family. To Mass. But, one of the places, I think Carlo was from Milan, but where he said that his soul really flew was in the city of Assisi. And that's where he's buried today. Carlo's family ended up getting a kind of a vacation home in Assisi. So he spent a lot of his summers there. Yeah. And he just relished the spiritual nourishment that Assisi provided and being able to go to Eucharistic adoration, praying at the great tomb of the tombs of the great saints of St. Francis and St. Clare, and also befriending the local religious order. There's so many religious orders who are there, of course, the Franciscans, but other small little orders. There's a cute story of some religious sisters who I think it was included actually in the testimony for his cause. But these religious sisters were having IT trouble. They're having trouble with their computer, and word, went around town that Carlo was someone who was really savvy with computers and technology, and he more than readily, agreed to come and help them solve their computer problems. And it's just kind of a cute little story of that intersection. So it's beautiful that he's buried today in Assisi, in the Church of St. Mary Major is where you can see him in Assisi.
In Assisi, yeah. I have been there. It seemed like a kind of a smaller place, wasn't it?
It is. It's a nice small little church, and it's incredible though. According to the Diocese of Assisi, I mean, tens of thousands of people went to go pray at his tomb just in the months after his beatification. I'm sure it's more now, and it's a kind of an interesting thing about this particular church. So this particular church also marks the spot where St. Francis kind of renounced his worldly wealth, and it's a particularly favorite spot of Pope Francis, who actually went and prayed there during one of his visits to Assisi. And at the time, Pope Francis said that he felt like this was a place, that he wanted it to be a place, and he thought it was a place particularly for young people to discern their vocations.
Oh, wow.
Which going back and reading that, I was like, wow. And now you have Blessed Carlo there as well, as the heritage from St. Francis too. So it's a special place. Assisi is one of my favorite places on earth. It was one of the real treats of working on the book, was having an excuse to go there many times. I recommend everyone to go if they go on a pilgrimage to Rome, to also go to Assisi.
And I think around the corner, there's still like an original church that St. Francis prayed in. I don't think the Blessed Sacrament was there. It's a simple, small, kind of interior stone church. And I'll have to look on a map, because I'm just wondering, I don't know if you know.
There's certainly all kinds of places related to the life of St. Francis. Just around the corner from there is the home where St. Francis grew up in and lived in. And there's a nice little church there as well.
Now his parents were they or his father maybe like in the computer industry or tech world? Or?
No, his father. So when Carlo was born, his father was actually working in London as an investment banker. So he was in the financial industry, and then they eventually moved back to Milan not long after Carlo was born, actually, and he took over the family business, which is an insurance agency. So, Carlo does come from a pretty wealthy family in northern Italy, which makes it more remarkable that he didn't really care about superficial things. That was not Carlo's priority at all, especially living in Milan. He couldn't care less about fashion, didn't need a lot of material things. Actually, his mom talks about, she would try to buy him things, and he's like, no, please, I don't want, even another pair of sneakers. I'm fine with what I have. So,
and I guess I could just get online and see it, but I've yet to see that Eucharistic informational thing he did.
Oh yeah, you got to check it out. It's great. So you can find a virtual version of it online.
What's it called?
Eucharistic, the Eucharistic miracles. If you just type in Eucharistic miracles of the world, Carlo Acutis, it'll come right up, and you can see it online in pretty much the same form it was, back in the early 2000s. But the exhibition itself has been displayed, and it hasn't changed either. It's, really much in the same form it was, and it's gone on to travel all over the world. It was most recently displayed at the National Eucharistic Congress.
Yeah.
And every time I went over there at the Congress in Indianapolis, there was such a long line
I know.
to get in.
I couldn't get in either. Yeah.
But that's a great thing that people were lining up.
Did he write anything there that struck you, or that was some insight to the Eucharist? Or
Yeah. So one of the challenging things writing a biography about Carlo Acutis, not only that he only lived 15 years, which in other biographies, might be the first chapter of a book, but that Carlo he didn't keep a diary. We don't have many writings from him. But we do have a lot of things that, a lot of great testimonies from other people of, what things Carlo said to them or things he liked to say that touched their lives. And he has all there's great like catchphrases associated with him. One of them is, the Eucharist is my highway to heaven.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing that he liked to say that became true with living just such a short life. And
I know. I think about it here, like Birmingham, like a handful of years ago, that they redid some of our interstate downtown and expanded it and grooved it and sloped it and all this stuff. And and I remember it was like $800 million somewhere in there, and I was like, wow. I mean, can you imagine, just for this mile long, whatever, and even if that even, but I thought, man, imagine that like in a developing world economy or something. And I thought, just so we could go even faster on these roads. And because we would take that to go up to Hansville. And we had to do this other route that was pretty beat up roads and everything. And but it just made me think about kind of the American culture, fast pace. We love our driving. We love fast roads. And it's quite an image for the Eucharist to describe it as this avenue, this highway, this superhighway to heaven, that it just suggests that you're operating by a power not your own, or you're able to really move on this, advance in the spiritual life.
Yeah,
I love that image. But in that just that information fair of the Eucharist, did he do any particular writing or reflection about the Eucharist? Or
so what it is it's a collection of different Eucharistic miracles from around the world, and it's very informative. It's just maybe a photo and the historical information, and so Carlo used his computer to help research this. He was working with his family to put this together for about 2.5 years, and the exhibition premiered during the year that Pope John Paul II declared as the year of the Eucharist. So it was very good timing with that. And he and his family actually traveled to some of the sites of the Eucharistic miracles, and his mother described how he liked to take photos of to include in the exhibit and some of these sites. It's one of the perks of living in Europe and being able to travel to easily to these great places of pilgrimage. I know Carlo made several pilgrimages as well to Lourdes and had a great devotion to Our Lady, and also traveled to Fatima, and that was a place. Actually, on the cover of my book is a picture of him in front of the Fatima shrine, and he loved the Fatima children and message. But one of his favorite Eucharistic miracles was one that took place in Italy, in the town of Lanciano. It's one of the oldest Eucharistic miracles that we know of that took place in the 8th century. And basically a monk was having doubts about the existence of Christ in the Eucharist. And while he was offering Mass one day, after the consecration, the Eucharist changed in his hands into this flesh. And one of the reasons why Carlo liked that particular Eucharistic miracle was because of some of the scientific analyses that have been done on this transformed host that has remained intact throughout the centuries. And so this one scientist went in and did analysis of it and found, not only was it human tissue, but it was cardiac tissue in particular. It was tissue from the heart. And it was of the AB blood type, the same found on the Shroud of Turin. And
is that universal donor? I've always wondered.
No, yeah, right. Wouldn't that be so perfect?
Yeah.
I think that's type O. But Carlo loved that because he didn't understand why. So especially in Italy, you see a lot of cultural Catholicism where people are baptized Catholics, but they don't actually believe in the real presence, or if they do, they don't act like they're not going to Mass on Sundays. And that was Carlo was always looking for ways, and we have his spiritual director has attested to this, that he felt that Eucharistic miracles were a way to could be persuasive in bringing people back to the sacraments, back to Mass, back to the presence of Christ.
I think that is like the $1 million question. Like, how do we even? I remember one priest here used to tell us, Father Angelos used to say, you should read something about the Eucharist every day, to help you with your faith. And it's like, how do we jumpstart and foster? I mean, I want to say too, it's like, the secular world life hacks are talking about, you just start doing something and then the interest grows, right?
Yeah.
And so I almost want to say that with the Eucharist.
I think one of the beautiful things about the Eucharist is that it's not so much about our efforts. You can go and you can sit in front of the tabernacle and you can do absolutely nothing. Like you don't. I mean, of course, be reverent, but what I mean is, His presence doesn't rely on. At least I'm a layperson, but doesn't rely on anything that I do. He is there, and I'm just there with the Lord in the tabernacle, and that's a comfort too, right?
Yeah, Mother Angelica would talk about that on her show. Just go and sit in front of the Eucharist.
Yeah, we heard a lot of great testaments about that during the National Eucharistic Congress. Beautiful stories about people that were. There was one, I think, a Sister of Life, who was sharing a story about a woman who would just sit in the parking lot because she couldn't bring herself yet to go into the church. But then slowly, she got a little bit closer, and then eventually just spending time, just being there with Christ's presence. It can be a powerful and life-transforming thing.
Yeah, I remember interviewing someone on Life on the Rock. I think it was during Jeff Caven days, actually. This was a long time ago. But he was a musician. He was into satanic occult stuff and everything. And someone brought him into the Catholic Church, and he was just blown away by the priest. He just felt the presence of God.
Wow.
In the tabernacle. It led to this big conversion.
Wow.
With him. But it is kind of ironic, like in a very busy, productivity, cult-minded culture, that it just seemed like people are worn out, stressed out. And maybe if you gave them this big how to meditate booklet or something, people say, I don't want one more thing to do.
Right.
Just go and be, right?
Yeah, but I think one of the things with our busy culture too, it's easy to put off prayer, put off attending, daily Mass. If that's something you want to do, it can be easy, to prioritize other things ahead of it. And that's where Carlo's really a great example for us, that he, put God first and made time for, his witness shows, if you really believe that Jesus is present in the Blessed Sacrament, like, why aren't you making every effort to go? That's the sentiment he expressed. And what Pope Francis said the day after his beatification, when he was reflecting on Blessed Carlo's witness, he said that Carlo Acutis is a witness to young people that true happiness is found when you put God first. And I think that's kind of one of the secrets to Carlo's life, is that he had his priorities straight, which is a remarkable thing for a young man. But I think also one of the ways in which Carlo is a saint in that his life doesn't really make sense if God doesn't exist.
Right.
You know, his life from a purely non-Christian point of view would be just a tragedy. You know, a boy who dies, you know, at 15, you know, before their full potential. But with God, you know, because he used his 15 years and united so much of his time with God, you know, God made that short period of time exceedingly fruitful for his kingdom. You know, we see just thousands of people that have been touched by his story or brought closer to the faith because of Carlo, or been inspired. But when you look at it, you know, that's why, you know, publishing this book and talking to secular media, they're still like trying to figure him out, you know, like, I don't get it. Like, so he just went and he prayed every day and he helped the poor and he told
did work
people,
with the poor.
What?
He did work with the poor.
He did. Yeah. So that was something we spoke a bit on Life on the Rock about, the man who converted from Hinduism to Catholicism because of Carlo. And when I interviewed him and we spoke about, you know, what was it about Carlo? You know, of course it was the conversations he had about Carlo with Carlo about the faith and the Eucharist and seeing him pray. But he said one of the things that really just made Carlo's testimony shine for him, you know, and ring true, was seeing how Carlo cared and helped the poor. And that was something that for him was just like, just so striking, you know, seeing the way that Carlo interacted with the beggar who stood out, you know, on the steps of the church where he went to daily mass, and how this little boy, you know, went home to his parents and were like, can we, you know, put some food together in some Tupperware and bring it to the homeless on the streets? And so he did have that great love too, which is an important part of his witness.
And we'll just close with this. Was there one thing that really like made you want to write the book, or something that struck you about his life that said this is sanctity, or something like that?
Oh, wow. It's so hard to pick. But I think one of the moments that I think a lot of Carlo's sanctity was kind of, you know, hidden, you know, during his life, and things came out, you know, in testimonies after he died. But I think one of the moments where you really see his heroic virtue was in the moment when he received his cancer diagnosis at the age of 15, being told you have leukemia, and just accepting that with such serenity and such trust in the Lord. And then while he was suffering from cancer, Carlo Acutis said, I offer everything that I'm suffering for the Pope and for the Church. And just to have that firm belief in, you know, the power and meaning of redemptive suffering, that, you know, all the difficulties and challenges we're going through have value when you unite them with the salvific offering of Christ on the cross. You know, Carlo fully believed that, you know, 100%. And just the fact that at the age of 15, he lived his life in such a way that he was ready to go. Like, he didn't see death as something to be dreaded, but as a moment of total surrender to the Father's loving arms. And that's something that I think strikes a lot of us, you know, when you think about it. You know, if that were me, you know, am I in that state of, you know, have I lived my life in such a way that that's true for me? You know, Carlo and I are contemporaries. We're born just months apart, so that was one of the reasons that was also fun to work on this particular biography. Is it's not every day you get to work on a biography of someone who is the same age as you in all these different stages of life and history. So he's really special, and I hope that, you know, my prayer throughout writing the book was, you know, even if just one person is drawn closer to God, by writing down the story of this, future saint, then it's worth all the effort in the world.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Courtney, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Father. This has been incredible.